morning? Is it evening? I just can't tell anymore. I hosted the morning show with you, Tom Benson, 3 days this week, and now we're back here. But it's in the evening, I think, right?
Well, wasn't there a movie out called If It's Tuesday, This is Belgium?
I have no idea
Something
what you're
like
talking about. What?
There was a movie. They got so confused as to where they should be at what day. They just came up with if it's Tuesday, this must be Belgium. Yeah, they had their itinerary.
All I have to say is, because Bud was back this morning, and when I was hosting, you would go to McDonald's every morning.
I would.
And you would get, I guess they have a buy one, get one deal or something.
Pretty close to it. It was on sale, as they say, yes.
And so you would get me an Egg McMuffin.
And did Bud get you one this morning?
No.
Jeez.
I was like, I walk in and I'm like, where's my Egg McMuffin? I'm hungry. I was going through Egg McMuffin withdrawals because you were not there this morning, Tom Benson.
Oh.
All right, this is Beyond Reason Radio. We are back here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight. But if you miss any of the show, of course, you can catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. By the way, Facebook is going to be a big topic for me tonight, and we're on Facebook Live right now. So if you want to like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, you can check us out. And, I mean, if you dare, you might be worried that Zuckerberg's stealing your data.
Put the kids to bed first. Let's put it that way.
Yes, I know, because Facebook is so scary now because they keep track of what you like and what you watch. You know what they might do next? They might give you an ad. Oh no, not an ad. Oh jeez. Oh, I really, really have to rant about this Facebook thing, and we will in a second. By the way, if you want to call, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. And Mr. Tom Benson is here tonight, as always. And how are you, Tom?
Doing fine, pushing buttons, making things happen.
There we go. Good.
There you go.
That's just the way I like it. I try to push buttons from this side of the glass in a different way, but you push those buttons on that side of the glass.
There you go.
So this whole Facebook thing, because it was a big story this week because the CEO of Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, testified to Congress. You know, he testified to the Senate first, and then he testified to the House of Representatives. And it's becoming increasingly concerning to me how many of those congressmen on Capitol Hill are reacting to Facebook and how they reacted to Facebook and what they asked Mark Zuckerberg. This apparently all started because of a so-called data breach. Let me explain once again what this so-called data breach was. So Cambridge Analytica wanted to get information so they could target ads to help the Trump campaign. They put out this app where you filled out a survey. When you agreed to the terms of that, they took the data, saved it. They were supposed to delete it, but they didn't. They saved your data from your Facebook, and then they used it because they wanted to target ads to people. That's it. That's pretty much all it is. Sometimes people take your data and they sell it to other firms so they can target ads for you. And everyone's all up in arms. Not my data, my precious data. Why do you care about your data so much?
It's the same as if Amazon sent you advertisements on email about items that are similar to what you've already purchased.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not even, I don't even think it's even that nefarious because I can go to your profile right now. I can see what you've liked. I can see what you've posted. I can see your background. You post it publicly. So why do you care that some of your data keeps track of what your interests are and who you are? Why do you care if that goes anywhere? What's at the bit? It's public. If you don't like it, don't go on Facebook.
That's because Cambridge Analytica worked for the Trump.
Yes.
That's the issue.
Because
Obama did the same thing in 2012, and I don't recall any congressional hearings being held then.
And Obama wasn't the only one who's done this.
It's typical, yeah.
Now, Obama, the way they did it with Obama, maybe it wasn't quite as underhanded. Cambridge Analytica kind of misled you because they put this app, but it's basically the same thing. They got your data because they wanted information so they could campaign better. That's it. That's pretty much it. But what I'm seeing now from all these congressmen who have no idea what they're even talking about when they were asking Mark Zuckerberg questions, that was the most obvious part of that whole thing, is they're calling for the government to either regulate Facebook or they're calling for the government to take it over or something and then break it up. Really? You expect the government, the federal government, to do a better job with Facebook than Facebook? All those senators who had no idea what they were talking about? And when they were asking Mark Zuckerberg questions, you really trust them with control over Facebook?
And I wonder how many of the senators and congressmen own stock in Facebook.
Well, I don't know. They were saying that Facebook gives a lot to their campaigns, to a lot of congressmen. Well,
there you go, too, yeah.
The whole thing is ridiculous, and we're going to get more into that in a second, and some of the questions that they were asked. But I actually think this is a symptom of a much bigger problem in this country. And this has been a theme on this show before, and, I've talked about it. Over and over again, every time there is a problem, and like I said, this whole Facebook thing, it's the most overblown, quote-unquote, problem that I've seen in a long time. It's not really that much of a problem. Like I've said, lots of places have been doing this for a while.
Well, last week you said the Sinclair broadcast situation was overblown, which I agree with you on that.
There's a couple of them out there this week.
But the underlying reason for that is because a lot of people don't like the fact that Sinclair is trying to merge with Tribune television stations across the country.
Well, yeah, there's always underlying reasons why. I mean, there's two reasons. There's two big reasons, which I mentioned before, why everyone's making a big deal about what happened with Facebook. The first reason is because there's a connection to Trump. It's politics. Mm-hmm. It's partisan politics. The second reason is because Facebook is a big company with a lot of influence, and anytime there's a big company with a lot of influence, Congress wants to get its greasy paws all over it because they know it will be popular with their constituents because they're doing something, quote unquote, but it's also more power and, frankly, more money. They can extort them. A lot of these congressmen are like, probably when Zuckerberg, after he testifies, are talking to them behind closed doors, and they're like, you want regulation. You don't want regulation, right? My campaign needs some extra money.
By the way, does your lobbyist have my phone number?
Right. My campaign could use some of that Facebook money right now. And by the way, so regulating Facebook, that's something you don't want, huh? Yeah, well,
let's work on that.
Exactly. That stuff goes on. But I want to get to a bigger picture issue with all of this because I think this is a symptom of a much bigger problem in this country. And that is, over and over again, every time there's a so-called problem, we want to run to the government to create more laws, thinking that more laws or more government regulation or more government action is what's going to solve all of these problems. Do you honestly believe that government action is going to solve the problems that are caused in this country by Facebook? No, they'll probably make them worse. So do you believe more laws are really the answer in this country? If anything, this country is already drowning in too many laws. Just ask a lawyer. How are these lawyers making all their money? Because there's all this litigation going on. There's all these laws going on. They can make a ton of money off of all of these laws. We're drowning in laws, if anything. We have not only seen this with Facebook, but we've seen it from everything from school shootings to health care. There's a problem with school safety. We need more laws, anti-gun laws. There's a problem with health care. We need more laws. It doesn't matter what it is. This really bothers me because the solution to a lot of these problems is not more laws. Like I said, we're drowning in laws. And this is true of Facebook, too. The solution to a lot of these problems is people in this country need to take more personal responsibility in their lives. Raising your kids right would be one of them. And we need to take more responsibility as individuals to better affect the culture. This is true of Facebook as well. It's not Facebook's fault that a lot of this stuff is happening. Yeah, with data breaches, whatever. But a lot of these divisions that we see on Facebook, it's not Facebook's fault. It's just a platform. It's us. It's the people's fault. It's the culture. We have to look at the culture and better the culture if we're going to fix a lot of these problems. But that's not what we want to do anymore. We don't want to take a look at ourselves as individuals or ourselves as families or ourselves as a culture or a country. What we want to do is there's a problem and we want to run to the government to fix it, to create more laws, and we think that will solve everything. It won't solve everything. In fact, a lot of times it makes it worse. You know, I read a piece this week, and I'm going to share some of it with you right now, on Conservative Review by Steve Deese. He talked about this, and I think he makes a great point. His article is titled, "People Are Not Basically Good." Pretty controversial statement, but he makes the point on what he's getting at here. He says, "It's not enough to know that, though. Based simply on the awful visuals of small children suffering from the chemical attack in Syria last weekend, while those images are horrifying, the simple fact that there is evil in the world is not by itself evidence that we are all on some level complicit in a more general fallen state. It could be that we lost our inherent nobility through a series of sloppy choices. It could be that we were a victim of circumstances that got the better of us and forced us into decadence or malevolence. It could be that we simply chose to forsake the goodness inside of us because of a drug-like obsession with the bad." He says, "And most of us, Christian and otherwise, usually default to these beliefs in the aftermath of children being slaughtered. This can't be who we are, and clearly we're better than this. That's why we create things like the United Nations, or mandate public education, or pursue gun control. The problem is never really us, but instead the insufficiency of the organizational or motivational feng shui we find inside ourselves." This is Steve Deese writing in Conservative Review. Mm-hmm. He says, in essence, rearranging the deck chairs really can save the Titanic from sinking when you practice this worldview. For example, former Obama State Department spokesman Marie Harf, who was just given her own radio program, once opined that violent urges in the Middle East could largely be solved by a quality jobs program.
I remember that.
And he is so right on so much of this. When we have problems in this country, we think, well, we can do better. So what we have to do is create all these laws and create all these government organizations and rearrange society, better engineer it, and that'll make everything better. And he's saying no. And that's a great example. You honestly think a quality jobs program is going to be the ever-solving problem in the Middle East? Give me a break. But here is the truth, he says. The more we talk to each other while believing lies about who we truly are at heart, the more we will come to hate each other. And the more we seek solutions to transcend that hate via cheap, counterfeit notions of utopia. The deeper we will dig in our own biases and our own tribalisms, thinking them righteous to the point of genocide or infanticide of our own children. That's how you know we aren't basically good. Not because we kill each other, but because our responses to killing each other are just as broken and confused as what brought on the killing itself. But that won't happen, and the rest of the world will make countless excuses for why it won't happen. We are broken from the start, he says. We remain broken at the end. What happens in between will be broken despite our best intentions, but it can be redeemed by something not of this world. That something is God. And if we don't believe God made those children in Syria and live accordingly, our wish to prevent the murder of those children who follow in the future can't and won't be stopped. Because without God, that's just who we are. The main reason I wanted to read that, and I was bringing up Facebook as an example, is, like I said, there are many problems in this world, many problems in this country. And we often think in today's world that the solution is, and I gave an example earlier this week on the morning show. We think the solution is to run to government. And if government creates a new regulation, a new law, a new program that will be able to re-engineer or reorganize society and will create some kind of utopia. We can't.
It's an extension of the nanny state.
Yeah, the nanny state. But it never works because individuals are flawed. People are flawed from the beginning. People are broken. That's why we need a savior. That's why we need God in our lives. But with all of these problems, we need to, I don't know, maybe instead of running to the government to solve these problems, maybe we should run to our churches. Maybe we should run to the Bible. Maybe we need to look at ourselves and look at the culture, because that is where the heart of a lot of these issues are. The government can put Band-Aids on a lot of this stuff. They can try to fix the symptoms of a lot of this stuff, but they are not going to get to the core of the problem. And for us to continuously be naive about that, we're just going to continue to drown ourselves in more laws, expecting the government to fix more of our problems. And frankly, it's never going to be enough. It's not going to work. 407-916-5400, text to 23680. So speaking of the Facebook thing, I want to play some audio of an example of how misguided some of these congressmen are when it comes to Facebook and Facebook regulation and all that. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffe. We'll be right back.
If you miss any of the show, you can download the Beyond Reason podcast on iTunes. The voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason is back now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. If you want to comment, you can call 407-916-5400 or text to 23680 where standard message and data rates apply. Or you can comment on Facebook Live as well, like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page, and it is up there. So speaking of Facebook, there you go. In the last segment, if you were paying attention, as you should have been, I was talking about the Beyond Reason reaction to this whole Facebook thing, and how concerning it is to me that many think the solution is for government to get more involved in the company, whether it's through regulation or even, I don't know, breaking it up. What's really concerning is it's not just Democrats that are wanting this, but Republicans. Many Republicans think this is the right thing. And as I've laid out before, most of these congressmen have no idea how any of this really even works. Zuckerberg pretty much had to explain it to them over and over again. He did it nicely. I'll give him credit for that. But a good example of this is Senator Lindsey Graham. And this is Republican, he decided to question Mark Zuckerberg, and he basically was going after them, calling them a monopoly. Really? This is what he said.
Who's your biggest competitor?
Senator, we have a lot of competitors.
Who's your biggest?
I think the categories of... Do you want just one? I'm not sure I can give one, but can I give a bunch? Mm-hmm. So there are three categories that I would focus on. One are the other tech platforms, so Google, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft. We overlap with them in different ways.
Do they provide the same service you provide?
In different ways, different parts of it, yes.
Okay, stop right there. Pause right there. Okay, now Mark Zuckerberg, he was trying to explain it because it's a little bit more of a complicated question than what Lindsey Graham was trying to get at. What's Facebook's competitors? Now, there's a couple reasons why Zuckerberg doesn't want to say it outright.
A good thing to keep in mind, he's a techie. Yeah. And if you ask a techie what time it is, they tell you how to build a watch.
That's a good point. I think it's just an engineering thing in general. Yes. My dad's an engineer. I get it. But you know, there's another reason why he probably doesn't want to sell his competition. He doesn't want to help the competition because he's a business owner. He doesn't want to give them free advertising. But I can name some. I can name a bunch that are competing with Facebook. LinkedIn, competing with Facebook. LinkedIn has a lot of people. Twitter. Mm-hmm. Twitter basically does a lot of the same things Facebook does. Not everything, but a lot of the same things Facebook does. Google Plus. It's not as successful as Facebook, but it's still out there, and it's still basically a social media platform. Snapchat. Instagram, which Facebook bought, and we'll get to that in a second. And there's many other ones out there that don't have as much of a following, but they're still social media platforms. MySpace was before Facebook. MySpace isn't around as much now. I don't even know if it's still around at all. But that's because Facebook did a better job. There's no guarantee that Facebook will be number one in the future because all of these other ones are competition. There's Pinterest. I know a lot of girls like Pinterest. Tom Menzel's like, what's Pinterest?
No, I know what Pinterest is, and I'm a member.
Oh, are you really?
I'm the 25% of the males who use it.
Oh, okay, that's why you gave me a weird look. Yeah, but I mean, Pinterest. It's a social. Don't you agree? It's a social media competition.
Sure.
To Facebook. Mm-hmm. So I mean, Lindsey Graham has no idea what he's talking about, but he tries to continue on with this point here. Here it is.
And it doesn't work well, and I don't like it. I can buy a Chevy. If I'm upset with Facebook, what's the equivalent product that I can go sign up for?
Well, there's the second category that I was going to talk about.
I'm not talking about categories. I'm talking about is there real competition you face? Because car companies face a lot of competition. If they make a defective car, it gets out in the world, people stop buying that car, they buy another one. Is it an alternative to Facebook in the private sector?
Yes, Senator. The average American uses 8 different apps to communicate with their friends and stay in touch with people.
Okay, stop right there. Zuckerberg's right. There is competition. Now, is Facebook winning? Yes. Facebook's winning the competition. So? Why is it so many people have a problem when a company has competitive advantage? They assume because a company is dominating the field, that means there's no competition. This is stupid. It's economic illiteracy. There is competition. Just because the competition isn't doing as well, because one company is doing it better, doesn't mean there's not competition. Why do you think Facebook constantly updates how they do their platform? Why? Because they know if they don't, the competition will, and they will lose market share. Just because Amazon dominates the online retail industry doesn't mean they don't have competition. They have eBay, they have Overstock, they have other outlets out there that do a lot of the same things. But Amazon does it better, so they win. Now, there was a time when, say, Sears dominated the competition. There was a time when Microsoft dominated the competition, and what happened? Apple came along. Sears dominated. What happened? Amazon came along. Walmart's the same way. Walmart's competing with Amazon. Walmart had to do better because they were competing with Target. Just because one company does better doesn't mean there isn't competition. But the government doesn't want that. They don't like a company doing better. They think it all should be equal. And the government should decide how equal it is. It's stupid. All that does is kill innovation. It's economic illiteracy. And this is a Republican, but we all know Lindsey Graham, when it comes to this stuff, he is a big government, progressive Republican. He loves reading about Teddy Roosevelt, I'm sure, who had all these antitrust lawsuits, and he thinks he's doing the same thing when he has no idea what he's talking about. Facebook dominates today, but it might not dominate in the future. Who knows? So that's why it's not the government's job to be involved in all this. All right, he continues on.
From texting apps to email.
It's the same service you provide.
Well, we provide a number of different
Google
services.
Is Twitter the same as what you do?
It overlaps with a portion of what we do.
You don't think you have a monopoly?
It certainly doesn't feel like that to me.
Okay.
Because it's not.
So it doesn't. So Instagram, you bought Instagram. Why did you buy Instagram?
Okay, stop right there. Why is it your business, Lindsey Graham, why he bought Instagram? It's none of your business why he bought Instagram, Lindsey Graham. He made a business decision that he felt was best for his business. It's none of your business why he bought Instagram. He did it because they wanted to. Stay out of his way. It's not your job to tell him who he cannot buy. Continues on here.
They were very talented app developers who were making good use of our platform and understood our values.
It was a good business decision. My point is that one way to regulate a company is through competition, through government regulation. Here's the question that all of us got to answer. What do we tell our constituents, given what's happened here, why we should let you self-regulate? What would you tell people in South?
Why we should let you self-regulate. You hear that?
Yeah.
You catch that a little bit there? Why we should let you What do you mean let me self-regulate? It's my business. You shouldn't let me. You work for me, Lindsey Graham. You represent us. It's not your job to let us run our business. That's not how it works. But that's how a lot of these big government people think it works. It's backwards, and it's wrong. Continues on.
South Carolina, that given all the things we've just discovered here, it's a good idea for us to rely upon you to regulate your own business practices.
Well, Senator, my position is not that there should be no regulation. Okay. I think the Internet is increasingly
important. You embrace
important.
regulation?
I think the real question, as the Internet becomes more important in people's lives, is what is the right regulation, not whether there should be or not.
But you as a company welcome regulation?
I think if it's the right regulation, then yes.
You think the Europeans have it right?
I think that they get things right.
Have you ever submitted? That's true. So would you work with us in terms of what regulations you think are necessary in your industry?
Absolutely.
Of course they'll work with you. This is
they'll work with you in order to protect their own interests.
Exactly. In fact, here's a headline from CNBC. Former Facebook exec says regulation would be good for Facebook and bad for competition. This is what he said, the harder the government makes it for companies to access shared data or data that changes places, that changes between different platforms, the stronger it makes companies that have access to tons of data within their own right. That means Facebook, Amazon, Google. Any regulation that emerges from this is most likely to entrench Facebook and hurt competition. Of course, Facebook, that's why he's giving lip service to some of this regulation, because he'll own the regulation and then they'll own the market. And then you want to see a monopoly, then you'll have a monopoly because they'll be in bed with the government. So Lindsey Graham's talking all big and bad here, saying you're a monopoly and that's why we should regulate you. And through the regulation, he might make them more of a monopoly. That's what a former Facebook exec is saying. This is how the government grows. This is how we get these big businesses that are in bed with government, and you get all this corruption. Now, I want to play my voice of reason of the day on this, talking about all of this, and I think he was exactly right. Greg Gutfeld was on The Five earlier this week. Fox News is The Five, and he was asked about this whole stuff with Zuckerberg, and this is what he had to say about it.
But my point to you is I think if there's news out of this for the general audience, it would be Zuckerberg agrees the U.S. government can regulate Facebook.
I think that was lip service. I think the lesson that Zuckerberg got, and most of America did who watched, is that we need term limits. We need term limits badly. 99% of those inquisitors didn't know squat about what they were talking about. It was the best argument for small government I've ever seen. I would have to say that the only person there that impressed me was Orrin Hatch. The bottom line, Facebook is free to use because it's an advertising-based product. We have people on our sales staff for TV shows and for magazines. They have to go to media buyers, and they have to present the demographic. We all understand this. The Five has a great demographic, affluent people who like to travel and like to entertain. So maybe we can get advertisers for automobiles or for cruise lines or for beer, because what we're doing is we're using our audience to attract advertisers, which pays for the shows so the viewers can use it. Facebook is exactly that model. And he had to explain that to these idiots. But the only person who got it was Orrin Hatch when he facetiously said, so Facebook is free, right? He goes, how do you pay for it? He goes, advertising. And then Hatch just smiled and looked around, basically saying, you guys are idiots. Okay, that's the funny part.
Look at
Sorry,
Warren's
Megan.
face.
The bigger problem that they completely missed, except for one person, the creation of fake videos that appear real in order to create fear and foment panic. There's new technology now where they can take your head and put it on a body, right? So it makes it look like, hey, a world leader could have just killed a child. But that's not how it's going to work. What they're going to do is there are going to be bad actors. Remember the Nigerian emails? It's going to be like that times 1,000. There's going to be groups of people that send out thousands of videos to people online of their heads on bodies doing things to extort you. This will be a problem. And this is a problem that private enterprise, places like Facebook, are going to have to deal with. The government's going to have to help them out. It's something we're all going to be faced with. As technology improves, videos will be almost imperceptible. You will not be able to tell what is real and what's fake. That's the scary part. They didn't talk about it.
I think he's exactly right there. Term limits, he said, is the biggest argument for small government he's ever seen, because you had a bunch of old senators who have been in Congress forever, have no idea how this stuff even works with Facebook or any of these tech companies, calling for more regulation and more power over the company they have no idea about. He's exactly right. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. Going to give you another example. We're talking about drowning in laws. We're also drowning in taxes. Stossel did an interview with someone talking about this, and they laid it out really well, and we're going to go through it next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffe. We'll be right back.
If you heart Beyond Reason Radio, listen to the Beyond Reason Radio podcast on iHeartRadio. Just download the iHeartRadio app and search Beyond Reason Radio. This is Orlando's Smart Talk Radio. Beyond Reason Radio continues now.
Yes, welcome back to the show, everyone. This is Beyond Reason Radio, your voice of truth right here, your voice of reason in a world that is beyond reason. I am your host, Michael Yaffe. We are on till 10 p.m. tonight right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. Of course, if you miss any of the show and catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. So I was talking earlier in the show how I think one of the problems of this country is that we're drowning in too many laws. It seems like every time there's a problem, we run to the government to create even more laws. And I think it's the direct opposite. Well, you want to talk about drowning in laws. We're also drowning in taxes. A lot of people think we're not taxed enough. The Democrats think we need to be taxed a lot more because they think it's the job of the government to solve all these problems. And the government needs the money to do that, so they think we should be taxed more. I found this interview, though, from John Stossel, Libertarian John Stossel. He puts stuff out on Reason magazine, and I thought this was really good at Reason.com. He interviewed Kristen Tate, who has a new book, How Do I Tax Thee? A Field Guide to the Great American Ripoff. And they talk about just how much we're actually taxed in this country. And when they go through it, it's kind of amazing, kind of stunning when you think about it. Not as bad here as some other parts of the country, but got a good education out of this, so I wanted to share it with you. Here it is.
Income taxes are just a fraction of what we pay.
And income taxes are arguably way too high, but they actually make up less than half of our personal tax burden.
Kristen Tate just wrote what she calls a field guide to the American tax ripoff. How Do I Tax Thee? Explores the many other taxes we pay.
It's crazy. California has a tax on fresh fruit that comes from vending machines.
Car registration, entertainment tax, admissions tax for movies, property taxes, garbage taxes.
This isn't an exaggeration. Every time you do anything, you're really paying taxes.
Rifle tax, plane ticket tax. But these are tiny taxes.
Well, some of them actually aren't tiny taxes. The reason I wrote this book is because I was getting charged about $200 a month by Comcast for my cable bill.
$36 of it was tax.
These kinds of fees are inflating every bill we pay.
Why should we believe you? You're 12 years old.
Well, I did the research. All of this information is available online. The results were shocking.
We need taxes to pay for government.
Of course we need taxes. The problem is that we're often being taxed without even knowing it. From going to a restaurant with our friends, to buying a movie ticket, to riding the subway, we're getting taxed on those expenses. In Colorado, they tax non-essential food items like napkins, bibs, and straws. In New York, they have a bagel cutting tax, which you get charged for whenever you buy a pre-sliced bagel ready for consumption.
The whole bagel, you don't pay the tax.
Yeah, you don't pay the tax if you buy the whole bagel. So I always get my bagels non-sliced to avoid this tax.
This is a left-wing town. They love high taxes. It's part of the deal.
If New Yorkers want to pay high taxes, they can vote for high taxes. My problem is the way that these taxes are implemented. Politicians are cowards. Instead of creating a tax, they magically create these little fees, and they don't have to tell their voters they raised taxes.
So people don't know. 911 fees pay for important emergency services.
Actually, no. In most states and cities, the 911 fees are just going to general funds. Chicago, for instance, they hiked their 911 fee in 2008. There was no Olympics in Chicago, but they kept that fee in place. And then in 2014, they raised it again.
Once they put them there, they almost never go away.
Absolutely not. Government only grows. Can we go for a walk?
Finally, there's the pet licensing tax. This is one tax that Tate and her dog refuse to pay.
In most cities, it doesn't go to dogs. It just goes to the general fund like all of these other fees.
By saying, I'm not paying this, you're taking a risk. Some vindictive bureaucrat.
I am taking a risk. We pay so much of our money to
The dogs put you over the top?
It's the little things, John.
The little things add up. What you pay in income tax is probably less than half your total tax burden.
So a little education on how much we're taxed. Did you know about the bagel cutting tax?
No, but it does not surprise me.
I mean, come on. So she's like, yeah, I just get the bagel not cut, so I don't have to pay the bagel cutting tax.
Well, the other thing, too, is if you still have a landline, look at your phone bill someday, and I bet you're still paying what they call the rural tax, and that is to get phone service into rural areas, which was instituted back in the early 1900s, and you're still paying for it.
Yeah, exactly right. They just talked about that, how they never end.
So whenever they talk about let's get the internet to rural areas or the poor, you're going to pay for it.
Yep. Well, we'll have a new kind of communication technology in 50 years, and we'll still be paying for broadband internet from today. Yikes. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffe. We'll be right back.
It would be beyond reason not to listen to Yaffe on your TuneIn Radio app. Download the app today and search Beyond Reason Radio. The conscience in your ear telling you the difference between right and wrong. Yaffe is back on the air.
So, Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, and many other Republicans in Congress are retiring. There's all kinds of speculation as to why. Most likely it is because they think the Dems will win big in November. I'm not as sure that that's as much of a given as they think it is. I think the Dems will win, but, I mean, Trump's approval ratings are going up. So the Democrats, all they have right now is being anti-Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have much else to run on. The economy's good. Other stuff is going well, although Trump, kind of started a trade war a little bit, which didn't help. But the economy is still pretty good. And the country, is doing pretty well. And Trump's approval ratings are going up, and Republicans' approval rating is kind of staying steady. So Democrats probably will win some seats. I don't know if it's going to be as big as they think. We'll see. I mean, the base is energized against Trump. But when it comes to Paul Ryan, it's weird to see so many on the left praise his departure. They vilified him so much. What they don't realize is that they have helped create Trump with their vilification of people like Paul Ryan or Mitt Romney or even George W. Bush. I want you to listen to an exchange on The View that really made this point. Meghan McCain was talking about this, and I think she was right. Here it is.
Here's the problem, though. What do you want? If Paul Ryan isn't good enough and people... Out. But that's not logical. We shouldn't want that. We live in a democracy. We should want two healthy parties debating against each other. But if Paul Ryan is the greatest sin, this is how we got Trump. Because if Paul Ryan and Mitt Romney and people like this are the worst kind of politicians, then you deserve Trump. Because he's not. He's a truly decent man that was trying to fight for democracy and conservative ideals.
I think she's exactly right. They vilified people like Mitt Romney so much that the Republican base is like, you know what? I am tired of it. So what they do, they elected a fighter. They elected Trump, who punched back. I mean, they deserve Trump. They could have had someone nice. like a Mitt Romney or a Paul Ryan. But no, they treated them like the devil. So we're like, fine, we're going to vote for the devil, but at least he'll be a fighter.
He'll be our devil.
Yeah, exactly right. You know, there was somebody else who made this point really well. Ben Dominic on thefederalist.com. This is what he said about Paul Ryan leaving. He said, Ryan was the most important Republican in Washington from 2009 to 2016. He now seems like a throwback from a bygone era, when voters expected their politicians to be straight-laced, honest, and sincere. He was serious and dedicated himself to trying to tell stories to the American people about the fiscal direction of the country. Stories which voters mostly ignored because they always seemed to involve hard news and histograms. Wisconsin, nice and a truly decent person, Ryan's approach was doomed in an era that values none of these things. It values the ferocity, the abandon of confrontational politics, not grand bargains and compromise. Ryan's response to this trend was to grow frustrated and irritated, but also to carefully and politely explain his policy perspective in more detail, to try and convince his interviewers to build momentum for the type of Republican Party he thought the nation needed. Donald Trump's response to this was to punch the media in the face repeatedly. The voters let us know which response they prefer. That was Ben Dominic in The Federalist. I think he's right. You know, unfortunately, because Paul Ryan, I don't agree with everything Paul Ryan did. I mean, he was supposed to be a fiscal hawk, and yet we're getting into even more debt than ever right now. That's not good. Paul Ryan probably could have fought better, and he was weak on immigration. We all know that. But he was still a pretty nice guy. He had some good conservative principles. He talked a lot about our debt problems in the future, our entitlement problems, but nobody would listen to him. But this idea now that this is what happens. Instead of having a guy who's willing to talk about issues in a nice, polite way, that day is done. That day is over. We now live in the era of Trump, and it's going to get uglier and uglier, and the Democrats really asked for it. The left asked for it. All right, we have much more to get to, including, you want to talk about the divide in politics, more and more talk about splitting up the nation, or maybe going to civil war. Something I've talked about before, and it continues, and it's beyond reason. We'll talk about that in the next hour. Stay tuned.
Well, I found some kind of conviction. Well, I've been...
You thought it was over after just 1 hour, did you? No. We have much more to get to today. There's actually a lot that I could have talked about on today's show that, frankly, we just did not have enough time to get into. But there's still a lot we have to get into. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I am your host, Michael Yaffe, the voice of reason, the voice of truth in a world that is beyond reason. That's right. One more hour. We're on until 10 p.m. tonight, right here on News Radio 102.5 WFLA. But if you miss any of the show, catch the podcast anywhere podcasts are available. We're on Facebook Live as well, so you can like the Beyond Reason Radio Facebook page. And Tom Benson is producing. And Tom, I still do not have my Egg McMuffin. Where is my Egg McMuffin?
Well, they're served 24 hours a day now, so you can stop at Mickey D's and get one on your way home.
You know, this might be the most important thing I say all night, but you know how everyone made a big deal that McDonald's serves breakfast 24 hours?
Mm-hmm.
I think it would be even a bigger deal if they serve lunch 24 hours. That's what I wish they would do. I want to be able to get a Big Mac at 9 a.m. Why can't I get a Big Mac at 9 a.m.?
I don't know, because I don't know. Good question.
They made a big deal about making breakfast all day. I want lunch all day because I have to get up at 4 in the morning, and then it's lunchtime for me at like 10 in the morning, and I can't get a Big Mac. I know. It's like I said, the most important. See, I got you thinking about that, huh? Yeah.
Which do you like better, Big Macs or Whoppers?
It's a good question. Hopefully neither are sponsors or anything. I like Big Macs because the special sauce, it's what it is. Something about that special sauce. And now they have the Grand Mac, which is like bigger meat.
Oh.
So it's a bigger version of the Big Mac.
Is that still available? I thought that was for a limited time only.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, I don't know either.
To be honest, Tom Benson, I try to eat healthier these days.
Really?
Yeah, believe it or not.
So in other words, instead of 2 Big Macs, you eat 1 Big Mac.
Exactly right.
There you go.
A small fry instead of a medium fry. But
Diet Coke.
I will say this: Burger King had Diet Coke. Yes, I do get a Diet. Don't make fun of me and my Diet Coke. Burger King had something called an Angry Whopper, which had some spicy sauce and pepper jack cheese and jalapenos on it.
Oh wow! Mm-hmm.
So I used to love that.
Mm-hmm.
But Burger King, they just don't have, the fries are not as good.
I had a Whopper last week, and it was $5.98. Isn't that a lot for just a Whopper?
It seems like it.
No drink, no fries, just the Whopper.
Really?
With cheese, $5.98.
Man, that inflation.
Yeah.
You know, there could be a civil war over what you like better, Big Macs or Whoppers. That's what will really divide this country.
Coke or Pepsi. This can go on forever, you know?
Exactly. Right.
I find that Pepsi is best with Italian products like spaghetti, pizza, and things like that. And I like Coke with hot dogs, hamburgers, and that kind of stuff.
Interesting. I have not ever thought of it that way ever in my life. That is fascinating.
Ketchup or mustard. You know, this can go on forever.
I know. It's ripping this country apart is what it is.
All right. I digress.
But you know, speaking, the reason I bring that up on a serious note, earlier this week on Bud's show, I brought this up. And I talked about how it seems to be more and more people are calling for steps that could lead this country into civil war. This includes South Carolina, some legislators out there. They basically wanted to pass a law that would bring up the idea of secession. So South Carolina could talk about secession if the federal government passed too many gun control laws. Mm-hmm. And that was just one of many things I've seen lately. This is something we've been talking about on this show for a while. Well, there's another story that got my attention on this, and I wanted to bring it up. Jesse Kelly, this got a lot of attention out there, not just, I'm not the only one talking about this, but Jesse Kelly, who writes for thefederalist.com, he wrote an article this week, the title which was, "It's Time for the United States to Divorce Before Things Get Dangerous." He is arguing that we should split the country in half now peacefully, because if we don't, there'll be civil war. Let me read some of what he says here. Mm-hmm. First, he quotes the Declaration of Independence. He says this: "When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which they have connected with with another." Now, of course, he didn't read the rest of it, which is kind of important in talking about this kind of stuff, but whatever, you get his point. This is what he said. He said, "Divorce is hard, but it's easier than cutting the brake lines on your wife's car." Well, that's a matter of opinion. I'm just kidding.
Depends on what you did.
I mean, it's not too hard to cut the brake. No, I know. I'm not married, so it is. We're not advocating for murdering your wife on Beyond Reason Radio. Right? No, people. "It is a long past time," he continues, "for an amicable divorce of the United States of America. There is simply no common ground with the left anymore. We are now the couple screaming at each other all night. Every night as the kids hide in their room. He says, we cannot come together, but we do not have to live like this. The history of the world is nations breaking up and redrawing their borders. If we want to avoid this political divide turning into a deadly one, we should do likewise." He's actually advocating for this right now. I'm telling you, there's more and more talk of stuff like this. And to me, it's frightening. It's dangerous. Mm-hmm. He said this, he continues on, he said, "Stop clinging to the past and acknowledge where we are as a country. Not where you want us to be, not where things were when your grandpa was storming the beaches of Normandy. Where we truly are." He says, "We are a nation hopelessly divided. We are more divided now than we ever have been in our history." I kind of doubt that. I mean, the 60s were pretty divisive. There was the Great Depression. There was some pretty divided talk in there. I mean, even the late 1800s and the early 1900s, there were union riots. You know, and of course the Civil War is the biggest.
And after the Civil War, we were still divided.
Yeah, exactly. Reconstruction and everything else. Yeah, but he thinks we are okay. Fine. He says, before you start screaming at me about the Civil War, keep in mind that bloody conflict was fought over one major issue. It was mostly one issue. I've talked about that before, but there were other issues. In those days, take 10 families from New York and 10 families from Alabama, put them all in a room, and you'd find they mostly had the same values and bad accents. Not 100% sure about that, but I digress. He continues on. He says, now fast forward to today and do that same thing. Those families have virtually nothing in common. We as a nation have polarized and separated from each other. He says, if you believe in God and limited government, here are the entities that now proclaim their hatred of you in full view of the public. The Democratic Party, media, Hollywood, the public education system, and now even corporate America. The GOP may have the House, Senate, and presidency, but we have completely lost the culture war. I'm not saying he doesn't make some good points here about the divisions. There are some deep divisions right now. But it's his solution that's problematic. He continues on. He says, it does not have to be this way. There is a difficult but ultimately peaceful path that ends with everyone getting most of what they want. We divide the nation in two. We can and will draw the map and argue over it a million different ways for a million different reasons, but draw it we must. And he actually tweeted out a picture of a map, and it was basically kind of like the Civil War.
Was it north, south, east, west?
North, south.
Okay.
Basically. I understand what he's saying about the division. Here's the problem with what he's saying. I think it's completely impossible. Well, let me put it this way. It's impossible to do peacefully. You are not going to be able to divide this country in half peacefully. If we do divide, it's going to be through war. The other problem I have is, say, I live in Florida. We live in Orlando. I work and have friends and go to church with people who have totally different political views than I do. How are we going to split it up if we all live in the same areas?
And why should you split it up?
Yeah, why should you? Well, we still get along.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we find ways to get along. I have friends that are pretty leftist. I'm still friends with them. But what I'm saying is, he's talking about dividing it geographically. How do you divide it geographically when we live in the same areas? There are many areas in this country that are full of both liberals and conservatives. This idea that all the conservatives are south and all the liberals are north, it's just not true. The other problem we have is this country is too dependent economically. We're too interdependent economically, and a lot more than we used to be. For one, this is what I said. We get a lot of our technology from the West Coast. We get a lot of our food from the center. We get a lot of our media from the East Coast. Those are just three different examples. We get a lot of our tourism from the South. There's no way you'd be able to split it up peacefully because this country is dependent on all those things. We're interdependent. Mm-hmm. And then when I talked about it earlier this week, there was someone who brought up the point that the states are too dependent on the federal government for money and other things.
Exactly.
It's a big problem.
Sure.
And then you have the problem of militarily. The whole purpose of having a union in the beginning was to have a common defense. That was the main purpose. So I just can't believe that what he's saying is even possible, not possible peacefully. I think if we did enter a civil war, no one would win. Because I think a civil war in today's world would not look like the Civil War that we had before. It would look more like the French Revolution. You would have riots and fighting in the streets. It wouldn't be like a north-south common type, traditional type war. It would be like the French Revolution. Mm-hmm. And this country would fall apart. It would be awful. It would be terrible. It would just be very, very bad. We should not be calling for something like this. I know he's saying we can do it peacefully. We can just split up the country. These states go with this country. These states go. I just don't think it's possible in today's world. Not peacefully.
And what if you don't want to move?
Yeah, what if you don't want to? You can't move. A lot of people can't move. They can't just pick up and go to the other country. It cannot work. So there was actually someone else on the Federalist who kind of wrote an article in response to this.
Good.
The person is Lyman Stone. Mm-hmm. This is what he said. He said, peaceful changes turn out to be uncommon. The boundary changes, Kelly, the person we were talking about before, invites us to consider, usually involve a very large number of people dying violently. When you look at history and you look at these divisions, it doesn't happen peacefully usually, which is why calling for this is very, very troublesome. He says, we must then ask what might happen if we went down this road. You say that Kelly's Federalist states seek to go their own way. Well, in 1860 and 61, when the southern states seceded, they thought that would happen would be the North would negotiate or else chicken out and sign a treaty recognizing their independence. And indeed, if it came to war, the enormous southern domination of the military officer corps seemed sure to give the South the unbeatable advantage. The war would be quick, handling Southerners a victory in their second war of independence. But it turned out they were wrong. He continues on. He says, Lincoln was steely-eyed missile man. More than that, he was ready to burn it all down rather than let the Union be torn apart. The cost of war was enormous. By my calculations, between 7 and 12% of the recruitable population of the Union states died in the war. For the Confederacy, it was between 20 and 30%. I think he's exactly right here. I think the idea of us splitting up and happening peacefully is very, very dangerous. Now, there are a couple solutions to maybe prevent something like this. One of the solutions, which he brings up in the article, the guy responding, he says the solution really is federalism. What we have to do is we have to let the states have more rights and stop giving all the power to the federal government. So if you do have a problem, you can move to another state that aligns more with your political beliefs. That would be a much better solution. Let the local governments have more control so the individual feels like they have more say in what their culture and what their government is doing. That is a much better solution. The other solution is we just have to learn to peacefully disagree with one another. We have to learn to try to find ways at reconciliation. It's the Martin Luther King versus the Malcolm X thing all over again. We need to go the Martin Luther King route, that if we have problems, there's a way to peacefully go about it, instead of the Malcolm X thing who wanted to do it violently. It's not good. We have to do it peacefully, but we have to do it as individuals with one another. We have to find, I know it's hard, and it seems like there's no way to do it because our culture is very divided, but I think it's still possible. And a lot of this has to do with the Pendulum book, which I read. I want everyone to go read Pendulum. Go read that book. I've talked about it many times. It explains a lot of where we are. Eventually, it's going to swing back the other way, too. So, but there is another thing that I think could happen as well, Tom Benson.
Mm-hmm.
In talking about, I don't think a solution of dividing the country is possible. Mm. There is one thing I do think is possible. It might actually happen. This is according to the Telegraph newspaper. Here it is. The chance of California splitting into three has moved a step closer after a billionaire secured enough signatures to trigger a referendum on the issue. Tim Draper, who made his money through Hotmail and Skype, has gathered 600,000 signatures supporting the change, way above the 364,000 needed. Those who want to break up California believe it would boost educational standards and reduce the political power of Sacramento, the state's capital. Providing the state authorities agree the signatures are genuine, a referendum on the issue will be held this November alongside other midterm elections. That's something I could see actually happening.
Now, I knew of in the north, which is, not the south, where right. all the metro is, they are looking to break into a separate state called Jefferson.
Yeah.
Now, where would the third area be if he's saying it's going to be three different areas here?
Not exactly sure. I think it's just north-south, north-middle-south, basically.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And, I mean, you have people in Orange County now really standing up against the sanctuary city policy.
Yeah, how about that?
Now, I don't necessarily think this is going to happen anytime soon, but that might be one solution where you have these big states that have diverse things going on. They could split up into more states, Maybe that's a solution. I think that's possible. I don't know if it's necessarily going to happen. I could see it happening. But this idea that we're going to split the country in half and have this peaceful division, I just don't think it's possible today to do peacefully. I just don't see it happening. And I think it's really troublesome that I see more and more people trying to lead us in a direction that seems like civil war. Because nobody wins. I'm telling you, nobody wins in today's world in a civil war. It would be disastrous. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. Or standard message and data rates apply. Speaking of war, are we going to war in Syria? I don't know. A lot of people thought we would have already attacked or bombed them by now. We haven't yet. I've been thinking a lot about this whole Syria situation. It's a real, it's a troubling situation, and it's hard to come up with a solution. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on that next. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffe. We'll be right back.
Listen to the latest episodes of Beyond Reason. Download the podcast at Spreaker.com. The place where we talk faith, culture, and politics. Beyond Reason Radio continues.
So I have been doing a whole lot of thinking on this whole situation in Syria, responding to the chemical attack. By the way, I've had some people who listen to the morning show, who listen to this show. Obviously, Tucker Carlson was one who were questioning whether Assad actually did the attack. I think maybe it was terrorists in that area trying to make it look like Assad did it. France, the French president, Macron, said that he has evidence that Assad did it. The main thing that convinces me that Assad did it is it worked for him because the opposition has left the city now after the chemical attacks. So that tells me that it was probably Assad to get those people out who were hiding underground, and now he's taken over. So if it wasn't Assad, I don't think they would have just left then. So I just don't buy. I have a feeling it probably was Assad, and I still think Russia was involved too because Russia wants to send a message. But I go ahead, Tom.
I was just going to say, I think that's one of the reasons why the U.S. has not responded yet. I think they're still trying to find out exactly who is responsible.
I don't. I think the reason why they haven't responded is because they're afraid of what Russia's going to do. Trump doesn't want. Trump is still friendly towards Russia. He has talked tough against them, but I think he doesn't want to be as tough against them. Mm-hmm. Not because of collusion or anything, but it's a tough situation because Russia basically said they would shoot down our missiles. I mean, do we want to start a war with Russia? I think that's a hard decision to make. And that's kind of the point I want to get at is because this whole situation is hard, and people, because I'm behind a microphone and I have a radio show, people expect me to have the perfect solution to this problem, But there is no perfect solution. If we pull out of the Middle East completely, Bud this morning on the show, he was saying what we need to do, we can do a bombing to send Assad a message, but then get out completely. He said protect Israel, but get out of the Middle East. Now, I asked him, okay, how do you protect Israel if we're not there? Didn't really have a good answer for that. The only thing he said is we could give them more military technology or something.
And we have a lot of airships in the Mediterranean.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But the fact is, I think if we pulled out of the Middle East completely, we might like it at first. It might seem like this feel-good thing. And I get it. That's kind of my emotional reaction sometimes. Why are we still there? So we'll pull out completely and we'll like it until another 9/11 happens. All of a sudden, we'll have another 9/11, and then everybody in this country will be like, why didn't we do something? Well, because you wanted us to get out. I mean, the fact is, when we pulled out of Iraq too early, it helped create ISIS because we didn't have as big of a presence there. If we get out too early again, you could have terrorist organizations there. Not only could you have terrorist organization, but we would basically be giving Syria permission to use chemical weapons in the future. They would see no repercussions. Do we want to do that? Also, we would give the new axis of evil, is what I'm calling it, which is Syria, Iran, and Russia, a new axis of evil out there. It would give them a new monopoly of power right next to Israel. We say this is not our problem, but if they gain a lot of power over the Middle East and have a lot of money because they got oil, and they're in a very precarious area in the world, and they're right next to Saudi Arabia, and they're right next to Israel, and they have all this power and all this land and all this opportunity, it's going to be hard for us to say, okay, well, let's get out, and we don't have to worry about it, and it won't affect us in the future. Eventually, it's going to affect us. That's just the reality. So that's why I'm always reluctant to say, let's just get out completely. But, and this is the other side of it, this is why it's really hard for me to come up with a solution. I can understand why people have that mentality, because it seems like a never-ending problem. But here's the big problem. Who do we support? When it comes to Syria, we say, okay, we can't support Assad, so we're going to support the opposition. The problem is a lot of these opposition forces
aren't any better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They have ties to radical Islamic terrorists. Some of them are radical Islamic terrorists. We say, oh, we have the moderate ones. Are you sure? I'm not so sure. So that becomes another problem. So I'm not saying this is an easy solution. But I am very reluctant to this idea that we just, for one, that our presence there has not done any good, I guess is what I'm getting at. There's a lot of people on both sides of the political aisle that believe that our presence there really hasn't done any good and has in fact made things worse. I'm not so sure about that. I really am not so sure about that. And I'm going to give you something I read earlier this week, an unpopular opinion, but I think it kind of makes a lot of sense. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal, an opinion piece, that was talking about the war in Iraq. I have wondered for a long time how history will judge the war in Iraq. How will history look at it? And I'm going to read some of that next. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffe. We'll be right back.
Download the iHeart Radio app and catch the Beyond Reason Radio podcast. Your safe space for conservative thought, not for political correctness. Yaffe is back right now.
So earlier in the hour, I was talking about how some are kind of calling for like a civil war or something, or steps that could lead to civil war. Someone texted in and said, the next civil war will start when they come for our guns, and it won't last long.
Oh,
ha,
boy.
ha, 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 evil laugh. I have had a friend who would say to me, bring on the Civil War. We have all the guns. Our side has all the guns. So, I don't think it's what you want, but I thought that was an interesting text. I was just looking up on the screen at Fox. They were saying that Trump still won't say what we're going to do with Syria. He said they'll make a decision fairly soon on what we're going to do with Syria. They've practically moved everything out of the areas in Syria anyways that we would strike. I don't know. We've kind of broadcasted that, but because we're worried about the response from Russia, I think.
Well, maybe we've accomplished the same end.
That's a good point.
If they moved everything out, okay. Sounds good to me.
But there's something that makes me reluctant about just pulling out of, say, like Afghanistan completely or Iraq completely or the Middle East completely. What if, playing devil's advocate, and I got this actually from a Wall Street Journal piece, what if in the long run, what if in the big picture of history, the war in Iraq was actually a good thing for us and a good thing for the world? Nobody wants to believe that now. And there's no doubt that Iraq was a complete disaster for many years. The main reason Iraq was a disaster is because we went in prepared to fight Saddam and his army. And we did pretty good at that. We were completely unprepared to fight the insurgency and Al-Qaeda in Iraq. That's why it was such a disaster. There was essentially two wars in Iraq. The first war was against Saddam. We crushed him. We won. The second war was against al-Qaeda and the insurgency, and we had a big problem with it. So really there was two different wars. But what if in the big picture, it was actually good for this country? There's still a part of me that believes that if we don't fight some of these battles over there, the chances are we'll be fighting more of them over here or in places like Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people think they don't believe that. I kind of do. That if we don't go in these nasty places of the world and fight the battles there, they grow more powerful, and then we're fighting them in Europe or here. And that's kind of what happened in World War II, obviously. We waited too long, and then we had to fight a world war. That's why we do this now. But there's a piece in the Wall Street Journal that talked about what's going on in Iraq right now. It says this, the debate over the Iraq war's impact, pitting critics like President Trump against defenders like new National Security Advisor John Bolton, has been dramatic since the conflict began 15 years ago. Then supporters described the war in utopian terms, as when President George W. Bush assured Americans it would be a watershed event in the global democratic revolution. Critics in America and abroad were as vehement in their pessimism, saying every Iraqi is a potential Saddam, opined one Middle Eastern academic when asked that same year by The Economist whether democracy had a chance in Iraq. Today's reality, though, continues on in the piece here, is somewhere in between. Yet it is startling to note, given the series of coups that made Iraq one of worst governed places on earth for much of the 20th century, that the country seems to be building a resilient democracy. Iraq now has a reasonable chance of joining a rarefied club. Countries escorted by U.S. troops into decent governance and national success. I'm guessing other countries would include Japan, South Korea, Germany. This is an interesting point here.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at Iraq today, and we're actually seeing somewhat maybe a stable democracy being created. And how good will that be for the world and for the peace of the United States? One less place in the Middle East that we have to worry about, especially for terrorism and other things. That's why I say I always wondered 30, 40, 50 years down the road what historians will say when they look at the big picture of Iraq. Maybe we didn't go into it for the right reasons, but will it be good for America in the long run? Like the Korean War, South Korea has been good for America in the long run. World War II, same thing. He continues on here. He says, a few hard measures of social progress demonstrate the significant improvement of Iraqi society. Start with national income, the factor that generally determines whether other good things can happen in a nation. According to the World Bank and International Monetary Fund, Iraq's per capita gross domestic product was 51% higher in 2017 than in 2002, before we invaded. The year before, By comparison, Eurozone nations grew by 11% in the same income measure during that period. Or take the annual mortality rate, perhaps the most overarching measure of a society's health. United Nations data show that Iraq's mortality rate fell 18% from 2002 to 2017. We keep hearing about how we killed all these civilians in Iraq. All these people are dying in Iraq because of us, but their mortality rate's actually a lot lower than it used to be because of us. Continues on. It says, but in the mercurial part of the world, that kind of checked and balanced rule that protects minorities and different viewpoints represents progress. While tribal preferences and favors will continue, there will be chances for prudent leaders like the current prime minister to extend Iraq's income rise and the decline in mortality. Reformers can press for improvements in education and healthcare and rebuilding neighborhoods. If today's trends continue for another 15 years, Iraq's representative government and economic growth will become impossible for neighbors like Iran and Syria, and perhaps also Turkey and Saudi Arabia, to overlook. So there was a big theory that by creating this stable republic, stable democracy in Iraq, that it could change the Middle East from the inside out. Now, I'm not sure I buy into that theory because Iran and Syria, they're not paying attention right now. But maybe if we look in the big picture of things, maybe the war in Iraq actually will benefit the U.S. in the long run. I think there's a case to be made that we're going to look back 50 years from now and realize with a stable republic in Iraq, man, maybe our presidents there did some good, did a lot of good. Now, people say, well, that could have happened without us. I doubt it. I seriously doubt it. People say the Arab Spring could have happened if we didn't invade there. The Arab Spring has been a disaster in some of these other countries. Egypt had an Arab Spring. They put in the Muslim Brotherhood. Then that didn't work, so they kicked them out and put in somebody else. Libya is a great example of the Arab Spring going haywire. It's been a disaster.
What a mess.
So that could have been an even bigger disaster if that happened in Iraq. Iraq could look like Syria does today if we didn't invade and put a stable democracy in there. I'm just saying there's a part of this is why I'm always reluctant, this whole move to just pull out completely, not even mess with it. Because there's a part of me that really believes that by us fighting the hard fight over there in places like Afghanistan, Iraq, and parts of Syria, that we are not going to have to fight him here. We're not going to have to fight him in Europe. We're not going to have to fight him in Israel. But people don't want to look at the big picture. They want to look at now. So just something to think about in terms of this whole what to do in Syria. 407-916-5400. Text to 23680. So I have to end the show today with something so beyond reason.
Uh-oh.
You just can't make it up. This is Beyond Reason Radio. I'm your host, Michael Yaffe. We'll be right back.
If you like Beyond Reason Radio, well, make sure to show it by liking the Facebook page at facebook.com/Beyond Reason Radio. Your voice of truth in a world of fake news. Beyond Reason Radio continues right now.
So, there's a lot of talk today about James Comey and his new book that he's coming out about everything dealing with him being fired and Trump and the Hillary investigation, the election, all of that stuff.
He wants to fund his pension plan.
yeah, most likely. And I got to tell you, there was also a report out that came out today that the reason why he decided to make his announcement that he wasn't going to charge Hillary Clinton or recommend not to charge Hillary Clinton, and because he didn't trust the Justice Department to get it right. And that's also why he sent out that letter to Congress saying they were opening the investigation into Hillary during the election season. And and now that he did an interview with ABC, hasn't released the full interview yet, but apparently he said Trump was like a mob boss and all this stuff. I have become more convinced the more I see James Comey that guy thinks very highly of himself. That he really just thinks he is the be all end all. He's the guy who will be the guard for this country and save this country from the politics of even Hillary and Trump. I really do that. Some people are calling him a grandstander. I'm starting to think he really is a grandstander. I mean, I've kind of thought that for a while, but because, and some other people are making this point, and I agree, where was he if he had all this information? Where was he when he was testifying to Congress? Even after he was fired, he talked to Congress. He wouldn't answer their questions. He could have given all this information out a lot earlier. Why is he doing it now?
Save it for the book.
Exactly. He's doing it because he wants to sell books. That's why. He wants to get all the attention now. I have become more and more convinced this guy is just some kind of big grandstander. By the way, in the whole Mueller probe and everything that's going on with that, we, on Bud's show, we talked with legal expert, Deb talked with our legal expert attorney, Jeff Kaufman.
Yeah.
And Kaufman says the whole thing of them raiding the office of Trump's attorney, just politics. He thinks it sets a bad precedent, which I was saying the same thing. Sets a bad precedent, could really hurt lawyer client privileges in the future. He doesn't like it. He thinks it's all just politics. They just don't like him politically, and they're going to find any way they can to go after him. So I agree with all that. But just seeing James Comey and all that stuff that's going on with him, I think he's just a big grand standard. I don't know. All right, so I don't know if you're ready, Tom Benson.
I'm always ready.
But it's that time of the show.
What time is that?
Stories so beyond reason, you just can't make them up.
Oh, this is unbelievable.
So, okay, I got this from PJ Media.
Yes.
Here's the headline. Brown University now features safe spaces for men. Yes, safe spaces for men. The Brown University, it's not what you're thinking, he says, by the way, which it isn't. The Brown University Health Services Office now offers safe spaces for men to help them unlearn toxic masculinity and combat traditional notions of what it means to be a man. So those men that go to Brown University, they could be toxic. They could have been in an environment of toxic masculinity, and they need a safe space. So they're going to go to this safe space so they can unlearn all their toxic masculinity. Oh, jeez. Viewing masculinity, as it's from PJ Media, viewing masculinity as if it were a public health crisis, Unlearning Toxic Masculinity offers a three-pronged approach for helping male students recover. A weekly discussion group to unlearn toxic masculine norms, a biannual magazine, and a video series.
Uh-huh.
Oh, we're losing men in this country. Where are all the men?
We're out to make money.
The crux of the programming revolves around Masculinity 101 peer education, a peer-to-peer weekly discussion group that convenes male students to talk about issues such as cultivating empathy and harm and healing. Oh, how sweet. 8 students have already been hired to facilitate these workshops. According to the program description, the workshops vow to teach students what healthier norms of masculinity can and should look like. Why do I have a feeling that these healthier forms of masculinity are going to teach them to basically be women? I just have a feeling.
Well, after a male bun, what's next?
The man bun?
Yeah, man bun, yeah.
Oh, man. What did I hear? I heard like a commercial or something earlier this week. I think it was on the new Deadpool thing where he was like, the man bun is basically this generation's mullet. That's some truth to that. Warrens Brown University, modern society is quick to bestow unearned privilege on men. Yes, some men are so unearned. They get all this unearned privilege. There is nothing in place to teach men, young men especially, how to avoid abusing that privilege or how to leverage it for good. What are you talking about? There's all kinds of things that tell men that they're bad and they have all this privilege. Unlike programming at other schools, the Masculinity 101 peer education program notes that it is open to all students regardless of gender. What? What? So you have a program that is for men to teach them not to be men, and you're inviting women? What?
I just read today where some gay parade somewhere banned drag queens because they were afraid they would be insulting transgenders.
Oh, jeez. Oh, God. Okay. I don't even know. Like, we're going to be afraid to do anything anymore in today's world. Yeah. It says, and especially since its program also is dedicated to destroying the male-female gender binary. Yes. That's the real problem with men, is they think they're different than women.
Really?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Mars and Venus.
It says, folks of all genders are taught to accept the gender binary as a biological imperative that can never be questioned when, in fact, the gender binary is a social construct that needs to be dismantled, the website says. Masculinity 101 rejects the notion of the gender binary as the end-all be-all and works to promote a more holistic understanding of oneself, encompassing one's many facets and contradictions. This is so absurd. This whole idea that men and women are not different, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I understand that you might have some men that are more feminine than other men, but there's biologically a difference between men and women, and it goes beyond the physical. It just does. Says the program is led by Health Services Be Well program, which also offers counseling for students battling eating disorders, drug problems, and other general mental health issues. Ultimately, says Brown University, the school is investing in creating safe spaces for men to unpack all of the things they have learned about masculinity and what it means to be a man. So any parents out there want to send their kids, their young men, when they go to college to Brown University, so they come back and they're not men anymore, I guess? I don't know. They've unlearned everything you've taught them about being a man. All right. I appreciate you listening to the show tonight. If you miss any of the show, catch the podcast anywhere that podcasts are available. Go to BeyondReasonRadio.com, of course, as well. Follow me on Twitter at BeyondReasonR. Appreciate you joining me, and, well, I'll catch you guys next time.